former president of this august organization. In fact, under my presidency 30 some odd years ago, we moved over here from the Harvard Club on Comm Ave because we were getting so big. It's a real pleasure to stand before you all today. But first, before I make some additional remarks, I'd like to know how many of you actually in the room knew Dave Donaldson. Please raise your hands. So it looks like about 20 maybe. How many actually knew John Brown? Maybe 40 or 50. Okay, thank you. I'd like to tell a little story to set the stage for the comments that I make, which are not very long in nature. But once upon a time, there was a shepherd tending his sheep at the edge of a country road in rural Wyoming. A brand new Jeep Grand Cherokee screeched to a halt next to him. The driver, a young man dressed in a Brioni suit, Cerruti shoes, Ray-Ban glasses, jovial Swiss wristwatch, and a BHS tie, jumped out and asked the herder, "If I guess how many sheep you have, will you give me one of them?" The herder looked at the young man, then looked at the sprawling herd of grazing sheep and said, "Okay." The young man parked the SUV, connected his notebook and wireless modem, entered a NASA site, scanned the ground using satellite imagery and a GPS, opened a database and 60 Excel tables filled with algorithms, then printed a 150-page report on his high-tech mini printer. He turned to the herder and said, "You have exactly 1,586 sheep here." The herder answered, "Say, you're right, pick out a sheep." The young man took one of the animals and put it in the back of his vehicle. As he was preparing to drive away, the herder looked at him and asked, "Now, if I guess your profession, will you pay me back in kind?" The young man answered, "Sure." The herder said immediately, "You are a consultant," which is what I am as well, which is what John Brown was. "Exactly. How did you know?" asked the young man. "Very simple," replied the herder. "First, you came here without being invited. Second, you charged me a fee to tell me something I already knew. Third, you don't understand anything about my business. And fourth, I'd really like to have my dog back." I consider myself extremely privileged to have known and worked closely with both Dave and John. In fact, Dave would often attend the meetings of the Canaris Group, and I described him as an atypical lawyer. Instead of saying no to things, he would say, "Well, let's figure out how to make it work." And he was usually successful. Many were the nights we stayed up late at Saranac Lake during our annual Canaris retreat, talking plan giving with Dave. And it was on one of those occasions we, the Canaris Group, with his help, drafted the first model standards of practice, to which we all subscribe as members of PGGNE and PPP. I still have a hard time with that. Dave was a great friend to me, to the legal profession, and most of all to anyone who worked in deferred giving, later bequests and trusts, later planned giving, and later still gift planning. And so too was John Brown. I met John soon after I began working at Brown University, and then often was introduced as John Brown. People got confused with John Lewis at Brown University. After he had left his alma mater, Syracuse, where he was associate director of planned giving. He moved on to become the creator and director of the planned giving program at Harvard. From that position, the seeds of this organization, PGGNE, were nurtured, and you can see his legacy in this room today with over 300 people present for the day. In the waning days of his Harvard employment, he founded John Brown Limited, a highly successful consultancy, continuing now with the leadership of his widow, Susan Fagan, his daughter, Jennifer, and Susan, I might add, whom many of us have known also for a very long time, and she couldn't be here today. She's working in Texas. John went on to a career of over 30 years consulting and educating people about the world of planned giving. He spoke to boards, he spoke to volunteers, he spoke to staffs at all sorts of nonprofits. He ran summer and winter programs for practitioners, always seeking to make them better representatives of our profession. He spoke to donors. He became known as the lead trust go-to person. His clients ranged around the world: Australia, Budapest, Russia, and all across this country. They numbered among them such illustrious organizations as the MFA in Boston, the National Geographic Society, Joslin Diabetes Center, Dana-Farber, the New York Public Library, Vassar College, the BSO, and so many more. I moonlighted with him for several years while working at Brown. We did feasibility studies for the Lutherans in the Midwest, the Foothill Hospital in Los Angeles, and several other clients. I remember being impressed that he always rented Cadillacs when we arrived somewhere. Now, how fancy was that? And when he was working in Australia, a gig which many of you know I picked up and am still doing, he would wear two watches, one for U.S. time and one for Aussie time. They, along with his cowboy boots and blonde hair, made it look like he was just off the property, as they call ranches and farms down under. And true to form, when he was on his own beloved farm in New Hampshire, he was most at home on his favorite John Deere tractor. Most importantly, John was comfortable wherever he was, addressing whomever he was addressing, training whomever he was training, publishing whatever he was publishing, helping a donor give away some asset to some organization, helping people one-to-one. No one was too big or too small for John to find a way to give, to help. And so it is appropriate that he be awarded, albeit sadly posthumously, the David M. Donaldson Distinguished Service Award, given in recognition of outstanding service and leadership in the field of charitable gift planning by the Planned Giving Group of New England. As John said, it is presented on occasion at the annual meeting of the group to publicly recognize outstanding individuals who, like David, have given of themselves, their time and talents to advance the gift planning profession. John mentioned there were a couple of winners here. I was going to read off all the names just so everybody remembers who they were. Conrad Teitel, Michael Boland, Andre Denikian, Jonathan Tidd, Frank Logan, Gary Forsheimer, Terry Simmons, Carolyn Osteen, Craig Ruck, Frank Minton, Caitlin Quinn, Tom Smith, Charlie Collier, Ellen Estes, Robert Sharp Jr., and Deborah Ashton. And now, Jennifer and Ryan, if you'd come forward, I think we would like to present to you, on behalf of the board and the membership of the Planned Giving Group of New England, in honor of your father, John J. Brown, the David Donaldson Distinguished Service Award.
Giving Group of New England for honoring my dad. As you can see, I have to have notes, and if anybody remembers, John Brown did everything with no notes. Principal days, seminars, no notes. But as many of you know, my dad was a family man and truly a farmer at heart. But beyond that, his great love was working with all the professional fundraisers in this room. John was an educator, and teaching others about planned giving and major gifts became his life's work. Helping others develop the skills to encourage gifts to your institutions was his passion. He always loved hearing from students and consulting clients about current or completed gifts. Be it large or small gifts, usually life-affirming for a donor, and often would be transformational for the institution. Giving and receiving was, is, and will continue to be food for our souls. Thank you all for making the act of giving and receiving so important and more understood by our world. And thank you again for honoring my dad, John Brown, today as an important part of this fantastic profession. Thank you very much.